Now let's begin. Welcome to the second session on economic security under the same theme as the previous session, that is US-China competition and the Indo-Pacific. We have 5 distinguished panelists here and online. In person, from your left, we have Ms. Mihoko Matsubara, Chief Cybersecurity Strategist at NTT Corporation, and Mr. Kazumi Nishikawa, Director of the Office of Economic Security Policy in the Trade and Economic Cooperation Bureau at METI. Joining us virtually are Dr. Henry Huiyao Wang, President of the Center for China and Globalization and a former counselor to the China State Council, and Mr. Matthew Goodman, Director of the Greenberg Center for Geoeconomic Studies at the Council on Foreign Relations. A warm welcome to both of you. Professor Kazuto Suzuki from the University of Tokyo will be the moderator for this session. Professor Suzuki, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Koyama-san, and thank you very much for JIIA for having this opportunity to have a wonderful panel of the experts to discuss about the economic security. The economic security, this is one of the most hottest subject of the international competition and geoeconomic, geopolitical issues, and people are talking about it. But are we really, there's a big question whether we understand properly about the economic security. When we go to different countries like United States or in China or in Europe, the concept of economic security differs quite, there are sometimes using the same words, but using different languages. And the interpretation of the economic security is quite diverse according to the context of the national security, economic competitiveness, and there are, variety of interpretation of the economic security in different countries. So this is a great opportunity to have Dr. Matthew Goodman from the CFR, and also Dr. Wang from China, and also we do have Japanese experts and the official from METI. So we do have the a great opportunity to set the sort of same tone of what we are talking about when we use the word economic security, and how do we interpret this. So I would ask Dr. Matthew Goodman and Mr. Nishikawa from METI to speak first, and then I would ask Matsubara-san from NTT to explain from a cybersecurity perspective, and Dr. Wang from China, Chinese perspective. So I would ask Matthew to have opening remarks for, let's say, 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Suzuki-sensei. It's nice to see you on screen. I'm sorry I can't be there in person, but I'm delighted to be here, and thank you to JIIA for inviting me to participate in this important gathering. So, well, as you said, economic security is a term that means whatever the speaker wants it to mean. It is not an agreed term. Even here in the United States, I think it has a different meaning in Washington than it does for ordinary Americans. But I think there are differences in our approaches, I think in between Japan and other countries as well. And I think we're going to talk about some of those differences. I also think there's a problem, a bigger problem here, which is not just terminology, but there is no real theory or framework to govern this set of issues and policies. When we had classical economics or Keynesian economics or even the neoliberal post-war order, there was kind of a theory of the case and a basis for implementing policy. Today, we really don't have such a thing for broadly defined economic security. So policymakers are just kind of taking steps as they see problems and responding to them in a way case by case. So I think that by itself is something that we all in the academic and think tank community ought to be working on to try and create some kind of framework or theory for thinking about all of this. But the way I use it and the way people here in Washington, I think, mostly think of economic security is in response. It's a need to respond to an increase in risk. There are new risks in the international economy, risks related to climate change, to supply chain disruptions. Frankly, the rise of China has posed risks here for the United States and our allies, and we need, governments have decided that they need to intervene in the market to mitigate or reduce these risks in one way or another. So to me, I think of economic security as any government intervention in the market that tries to mitigate or reduce risk in some area. That's the sort of broadest definition that I think covers the issues that we're talking about here today. There are offensive and defensive parts of economic security, of this story of reducing risk. Here, and I think in other G7 plus countries, the focus has been very much on, first of all, defensive or protective measures, strengthening export controls of sensitive technologies, strengthening investment screening mechanisms for inbound and outbound investments. And there's been, even today, news here in Washington about a new executive order issued by the president on data security. This is the start of a process of reviewing the handling of American citizens' personal data that is sensitive. And there's a new executive order on that was just issued hours ago. Tomorrow, there is probably going to be another, not an executive order, but an investigation is going to be launched of the cybersecurity and data security dimensions of electric vehicle proliferation, the development of electric vehicles. I think there's a concern or questions about what it means to have millions of computers, basically, which is what electric cars are, plugged into the network and the electric grid. And so there's going to be a separate investigation of that here. So there are many issues that fall in this sort of defensive or protective side of the story. At the same time, there are offensive or efforts to promote greater economic security through industrial policies, like here in the U.S., the CHIPS Act, investing in semiconductor manufacturing, in clean energy solutions through the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, and then work within the United States and with our allies and partners on joint efforts to promote and parallel efforts to promote research and development of new technologies and capabilities. So I think there is a lot going on. There are still here in the U.S., in my view, some tensions and some gaps and some trade-offs that have not yet been fully resolved in this story. For example, we are wanting to promote more clean energy technologies to address climate risks, but we also are putting restrictions on, and prospectively more restrictions are coming on imports of Chinese technologies, solar panels, electric vehicles potentially, and other things that will make development of clean energy solutions more challenging. So that's an example of a trade-off here that has not been fully resolved. And there are many other examples that I could give. The other big gap, in my opinion, and this is not the view of everyone, I'm sure, in this group, or it's not the focus, at least, in economic security, but I think it's really important, and I guess it's the last point I'll make, which is that when the countries who met in 1944 at the Bretton Woods Resort here in the United States were talking about creating a new international economic order and institutions and rules, they didn't use the term economic security. But if you ask them then, what do you mean by economic security? I think they would have answered creating a stable, predictable order with institutions and rules and norms, which we did not have before World War II, which, contributed to the depression and the war. And so I think it's very important when we talk about economic security to also talk about that sort of proactive, affirmative development of new rules and standards and norms of economic behavior that will ensure that we have predictability, certainly the basis for prosperity and growth, and frankly, security as well, in the broadest sense. So I think this is also, frankly, here in Washington, a missing part of the economic security story, because the last two administrations here, the Trump administration and the Biden administration, have been very skeptical about international economic rulemaking, particularly in trade. And so I think that's a big open part of this story that needs to be discussed further here. But I'll stop there because there are a lot of other things to say. So I'll let others jump in.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Matthew. I think you have laid a very good ground for the discussion, and I think you covered many interesting points. But I think the last point that you emphasized was extremely important, because often, even in the United States, there is a tendency that this concept of economic security slides into some sort of a protectionism or the industrial policy, and which is for the benefit of the national interest. Whereas in Bretton Woods system, initially the security was about free and open trade is the means for avoiding the war and the improving the security. So I think this sort of a contradiction, and this is where the discussion of the economic security comes into a very interesting point. But I would ask Mr. Nishikawa from the Japanese, particularly the official point of view, that what is economic security from the Japanese perspective, and also responding some of the points that Matthew has raised about offensive, defensive capabilities and variety of measures that Japan is taking for the semiconductor industry, etc. So it's almost impossible to brush it up in 5 minutes, but I would ask Nishikawa-san to do so, please.
Thank you, Dr. Suzuki, and I really appreciate you inviting me to this, the very important, topic with distinguished, the speakers as well as audience as well. Just as Dr. Matthew said, the concept of the economic security differs country by country and time to time. My American friend kindly told me that 100 years ago, when the Roosevelt used the word of the economic security, the meaning was, to secure the daily life, people's life, like the social security number or the Keynesian type stimulus plan to save the economy was economic security. 30 years ago, when the Clinton administration used the word of the economic security, it was free trade, WTO. So to secure that, secure the trade system was economic security. So therefore, that now what METI as well as the GOJ is doing is I understand economic security as national security. The METI established this kind of economic security action roughly 5 years ago, the 2019, by establishing a virtual unit inside METI. And we gradually, step by step, expanded the approach inside METI as well as the GOJ. And of course, now, as you may know, in the GOJ wide, a lot of things happens in last 2020, 2021, 2022. The establishment of the economic division under the National Security Secretariat, and also the appointment of the National Security Economic Security Minister, National Security Promotion Act, and finally the end of the 2020, the National Security Strategy was revised by including the economy and the technology as two of the 5 pillars. The less of the 3 is the diplomacy as well as the military as well as the information. So therefore, now since last summer, we are in the implementation phase of the economic security as national security. How we can do that? Of course, now we need collaboration with industries, because players of the economic security or the owners of the economic security asset is this is the industry or the business or the technologies people, universities people. So it's not military people or the Coast Guard. So therefore, the collaboration with the industry is really key, we think. So therefore, we means the METI. METI is relatively good at to communication with the industries among the Japanese government. So therefore, we, together with the National Security Secretariat, we started the new journey to deepen the ties with the industry. We established Economic Security Strategic Committee to deepen the ties with the industries. Actually, Dr. Suzuki kindly helped us to establish such kind of action plan for the economic security with the industries. In the action plan, what we are discussing right now is roughly 5 things. One is economic security as national security. What is a threat? What is a risk? If I, if I dare to say, what is an enemy? The national security means what is enemy and what we have to defend from against what. We didn't define any entities as enemy. Any countries, any business, anyone have no exclusive obligation to as enemy. But our enemy is unfortunately unstabilizing world itself. Unfortunately. So therefore, we have to prepare to defend our asset against such kind of unstable world order. Of course, we are very keen to regain the world order, of course. However, in reality, lots of things happens. Some is caused by geopolitical tensions between the various countries, or some caused by the additional, how can I say that, economic coercion, so-called, or something. Everything is happening, but no one country should be responsible for all. So therefore, we are very keen how to prepare our asset against such kind of, as a whole, the destabilizing world. This is one. The threat assessment or risk analysis is very important in this case. And also, what is an asset for the important asset for economic security? Of course, every country thinks that infrastructure and supply chain. Infrastructure is very important. No one disagrees. And we are very keen to define what is the important supply chain or the industrial technological basis among them. Because then we have limited resources and limited time. So therefore, we have to focus certain areas. For the traditional supply chains, like in Japan, the food and energy is of course important. But these two things are anyway important. So therefore, we have invested a lot in last 7 or more decades to secure the food and energy. But in addition to that, some industrial supply chain goods or the technology, it seems very important from the national security point of view. Of course, you can understand, some kind of space things, aircraft, or the defense, military equipment, some things. No one disagree about that. But we focus on the computing, clean tech, biotech. These 3 technologies are very essential. for the economic security. So therefore, we are very keen to focus on such kind of new technologies. But together with the NSS and other ministries, we are now defining what is then important supply chains or technology basis for us. This is the second one. But third one is then, just as responding to the Matthew-san's question, that we don't want to, we should not contaminate the economic security measure as a traditional industrial or the protectionism measures. So therefore, we define special tools for economic security. We try to separate the ordinary industrial or trade policy and economic security policy. So the legitimacy or the certain test is then what is the threat, what is then the risks, and what is the important supply chain. So therefore, by using these two concepts, we can define the traditional the industrial policy and special economic security strategic policies. That if we why we have to do that special things, because we face certain risks and threat. Why we have to think about such supply chains very important, because it is important for the national security as a whole. So in this regard, we are trying to separate the special tools for the economic security and the traditional things. This is three. But fourth one is then, anyway, we are very keen to collaborate with the industries as well. So therefore, we are trying to create strategic, the more trustworthy relationship with industries. So therefore, now, just as I said, the Economic Security Strategy Committee for the action plan together with industry is very keen. And also, of course, then, by using various, the measures, we are trying to provide certain information, risk assessment, threat analysis with industry, so as industry to prepare for the future disruption of the certain technology over the supply chain. So the communication with the industry is very key. And finally, that no one country, especially Japan alone cannot achieve anything. So therefore, we are very keen to collaborate with the like-minded or allies and the like-minded countries or the friend peoples to do together for such kind of economic security policy. But finally, I would like to emphasize that Japan is not so big market, and we have not so the huge technological basis or the industrial basis. So therefore, the disruption of free trade and disruption of market economy itself is the biggest threat for Japan. So therefore, we are trying to, what we are trying to do is then to avoid decouple of some things. Maybe I had better pause here. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much, Nishikawa-san. I think Matthew, as well as Nishikawa-san, has ended in the same note that, it is essential to maintain the principle of free trade. Meanwhile, we are paying attention to the risks and try to be more resilient. But the key basis of the economy is free trade, and that is the basis for the economic security. So these are the very interesting sort of a similarity of between Japan and the United States. But also, I think Nishikawa-san has mentioned about the separation of the security and the trade. So make sure that it's a typical small yard, high fence thinking, that the anything that needs to be controlled under the name of the economic security needs to be small and concise. So that is also very important point to be raised. And so the next I would like to ask Matsubara-san. I think Matthew has mentioned about the question that recent development, particularly it was very recent. Yesterday, the president has issued the executive order of the data security and talking about cybersecurity of EV, and these data protection is another very important element for the economic security. So Matsubara-san, I'll give you the floor to explain about the question of cybersecurity and data protection in the context of economic security.
Sure. So thank you so much. Mr. Goodman just pointed out that economic security has such a wide variety of areas to cover. And we do not have a shared definition what economic security means to everybody. However, I have a little bit of a disagreement because everybody agrees on that cybersecurity is important and cybersecurity is the foundations of economic security. Why? Because in our life, economic activities, and even national security are so much reliant on digital technology. And I'd like to explain why cybersecurity is important for economic security and supply chain. So I'd like to start with a number. So according to the cybersecurity ventures, so by 2025, the global damages caused by cybercrime activities will reach 10.5 trillion US dollars. It means that almost 10% of global GDP. 10%. It means that it's beyond the Japanese GDP, beyond even the United States GDP or Chinese GDP. And it doesn't even include the numbers or damages caused by state-sponsored cyber espionage or disruptions. So that is why we have to be we have to care about cybersecurity for economic security and national security. And both cyber espionage and cyber disruptions can affect badly our economic security. So I'd like to give you two examples. So one of the closest to our heart in the Japanese is the ransomware attack on the port of Nagoya, the busiest and the largest port in Japan. And it was hit by a ransomware attack last July, and it paralyzed the operations of cargo shipping for almost 2 days. And it affected not only ports, but it had a cascading effects to different industrial sectors, including manufacturing and also other sectors. So even like one single attack can create negative damage to economic security and supply chain, as this single case demonstrated. And the second example I'd like to raise is that even the cyber espionage can make companies to lose their market competitiveness. So this is a little bit an old example to give. So one Canadian major tech company was under a long-term, almost a decade-long cyber espionage. And they actually ended up filing a bankrupt back in 2009. Bankruptcy, it's a huge damage to Canadian economy, and also given how much technical support that company provided for the rest of the world, it's also the huge damage to the global economy. So that is why we have to be mindful about cybersecurity to support economic security. But as Mr. Nishikawa mentioned, that we have huge momentums to have a more active, viable discussions between the government and the industries on how to support economic security and also how to support cybersecurity. And I'm so grateful that the METI and Japanese government are willing to support that effort. And also from Japanese industry perspective, I see more discussions behind the scenes to talk about, willing to talk about what kind of trial errors that each company is going through to enhance our cyber defense. So back in 2015, 3 companies, including my company, NTT, decided to launch cross-sector forums to create good ecosystems to support cybersecurity, to share best practices and also cyber threats. And now that framework includes 44 major Japanese critical infrastructure companies from across the 14 critical infrastructure sectors. And also, last year, on the anniversary of the ransomware attack on one of the largest auto manufacturing company, Toyo Times is the owned media by Toyota, actually published a 20-minute video clips to talk about what happened during the ransomware attack on the major supplier. So they actually interviewed and collected all the photos and the video clips during what was going on during the ransomware attack. So now the Japanese companies are willing to share, to talk about what kind of the damages and also what kind of bad experiences we cause, because it will be helpful for other sectors and for the rest of the world, and also economic security. And even though that we will not see the end of cyber attacks anytime soon, but I think it's still encouraging. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Matsubara-san. I think you have touched upon a very important point about the transparency and the security. Often people think that the security matters always be behind the back door and behind the screen, so that not to be showing your vulnerability. But in fact, what is important for the economic security context, the sharing the information, sharing the best practice, and these are the way in which to improve the resiliency. And I think to make sure that everyone understands the common threat and best practice to respond to the threat is actually providing the better solution for the improving the national level security matters. So I think that that it was a very important point to be raised, and I think we need to discuss further. As a final speaker, I'm sorry for you to keep waiting, and thank you for your patience. Dr. Wang, please give your position from Chinese perspective.
Thank you, Mr. Suzuki, and also all the distinguished panelists. This is great. We have this conference, which is, I think, very timely. I mean, a world in turmoil. How can we rebuild international security and the cooperation? So I heard all the distinguished panelists' the point. I think it's well said. And we are actually in a fast-changing world. I mean, unprecedented. All the technology development, information, cyber, and of course, AI. So the human beings have to work together. On top of that, we have the risk of security of the climate change. So I think we have to sort it out. What are the major security threats? I mean, climate change, of course, AI, and also, I think also one of the other security that we have to secure is the prosperity security that we've been enjoying for the last 75, 77 years since the Bretton Woods system. So how can we really, keep that prosperity and not leaving left to a lose-lose situation, which is the theme of a Munich Security Conference this year, which I just got back. And so I think it's very, very important to talk about those things, and absolutely correct. I think we are in a war now. We're bound to work together. That's really the theme, because we are facing unprecedented challenges that our ancestors, our older generation never faced before. The issue, everything is global, and everybody has to work together. So in that case, we should avoid lose-lose. We should avoid decoupling. We should even avoid the risk that really overemphasized. So what I think is that the things we could do, actually, I would like to propose some concrete suggestions. First, I think we could really work together to tackle the climate change. I organized an official side event at Munich Security Conference just about 10 days ago on the how China, US, EU, and all other countries can work together on the climate change. So let's really build up some trust, build up some process. Because if we're all going to escalating on the security narrative, on the security apparatus, then we just reinforce each other. I had a speech at Munich. I said, everybody's driving up the military budget, and now we forget about the green budget. We forget about development budget. So the world is going to be, if we have a self-fulfilling prophecy, we're going to end up in really big danger. I think this is the danger situation we see we haven't seen in the history of mankind. So what I think we still have some hope, of course. We have a WTO minister meeting still going on. We should talk. We should safeguard the multilateral trading system so that we can keep the prosperity continuously, so that we can heavily intertwine, so that we don't have any conflict or get into the path of fighting with each other. I think we have, in Asia, we have RCEP, which is great. I mean, now China, Japan, South Korea, actually all part of that, and ASEAN and Australia and New Zealand. So let's continue that. And of course, CPTPP, I mean, Japan and Australia is leading that, which is great. I mean, in CPTPP, there's a lot of calls, articles on regulations on the security, on the data flow, on those higher 21st century standards. I mean, UK is joined CPTPP now, and China is applying to join CPTPP, and we should really talk on that. And also, we hope that US is coming back for that. So let's talk, things through those multiple platforms, so that we can build up trust and dialogue. And also, we have US has actually proposed the IPAF, Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, which is fine, And I think, if it's an Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, I mean, China is one of the largest economies in this region. Why not China cannot be part of that dialogue? Let's talk together. Rather than we are having all those circles built up on against each other, that's not the right way to go. I think China is open, inclusive. China said, China has built up a Belt and Road Initiative, welcome any country to participate, even proposed to work with B3W and Global EU Gateway and Indo-Pacific, the Middle East European Corridor, that proposed at the G20. So China's initiative is open. China has AIIB, which is 107 countries members. China welcomes Japan and the US to be part of AIIB. Let's all do the infrastructure together. Let's work with World Bank, work with Asian Development Bank. So that's using all those things to really build up, so we can avoid the security of all those worry we have. So that because we have a lot of platform to work together. So I think that's the way to go. DEPA, proposed by Singapore, New Zealand, and Chile. Let's all join that. Have some dialogues on how we can work on that. So what I think is it's very important. Japan has an enormous role to play. I mean, Japan is a very resilient middle power now. I think Japan and Australia, Canada, many countries have those enormous middle power influence. And probably we're getting the multipolar world. I think Global South as well, BRICS countries. And of course, US, EU are still leading in many ways. But I think we need to find a way to work together in terms of this, we need to set up a dialogue. So I think we should not overemphasize security, that we all go into the way of beef up our own security, and then we have wars against each other. And then we are totally lost in the prosperity we've been enjoying for the last 77 years. So I think, when we talk about the risk, when we talk about security, let's talk more about climate change, which is the biggest risk facing mankind. Let's talk about AI. We don't know. I mean, Graham Madison sent me an article he had with Dr. Kissinger, the last piece of an article Dr. Kissinger wrote with him on AI threats possible. Let's talk about those new emerging threats to the mankind. Cyber, of course. Let's talk about debris of the outer space, which is, always floating everywhere. We have many risks like that, but also now we have two or three wars now happening in a Russian war in Ukraine, and of course also the Palestinian-Israel conflict. So those risks are really serious. But I think international community have to work together, particularly China, US, EU, and of course Japan, and other countries too. So I really think this conference is timely. But try to build up. I really like the word cooperation, international security cooperation, which is fundamentally, I think Asian, is the only region that we have had a war. That's really great. We are having the war in Europe. We are having a war in Middle East. We are here. Let's continue the economic prosperity, but then we have to find a way to work together. So that will be my view. For this security issue. I really appreciate this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think Nishikawa-san has to leave, so just give the final words, please. Yeah,
sorry, I have to leave right now, but I would like to respond to one thing to the great explanation of our friends. Of course, then just as I said, economic security has a tremendous meaning that to save the economy, save the daily life, or the free trade things, as well as then to responding to the certain the disruption of the supply chain caused by, let's say, the Middle East event or the Russian-Ukraine event. So therefore, what at least METI or Japan is, focusing on, we will do everything. However, we don't want to contaminate the three things together. So that we have to separate that. But because then Japan is then not so huge economy, so therefore we think that the free trade and the market economy is really, really important. But if we contaminate everything, maybe we may lose it. That's my point. Thank you. I'm really sorry to leave right now, but thanks a lot. Yeah.
Of course, Nishikawa-san has a public duty to serve. So, well, thank you very much for your views, and please give a hand to Nishikawa-san. So, I think Dr. Wang has made a also very interesting point that the security threat is not only about the economic security, but there are a lot of other security, climate change, etc. But again, this is a session of the economic security, unfortunately, and we need to talk about the problems in the supply chain and economic the use of economy as a weapon and economic coercion, etc. So that's basic proposition of this this panel. But nevertheless, we are not neglecting other security matters. These are dealt in a different panels and different sessions. So, given the time constraints, I would ask one question about the relationship between. Well, I think everyone, one way or another, have mentioned about the relationship between the free trade and economic security. And yes, there are certain defensive mechanisms, as Matthew has mentioned, that to protect the national interest and to try let's say to protect from the economic coercion, the use of economy as a weapon, but also there are offensive elements which is promoting the economy. So I would ask the three panelists about what are the contributions of the economic security to the economic development, further trade, or the development of industry, economic growth, because this is, often economic security is regarded in terms of the intergovernmental, interstate conflict. But also, I think there are certain impact on the domestic economic growth and industrial as an industrial policy. So I would ask Matthew for in response to what you have said about the effects of the CHIPS Act or IRA in the way in which that it affects on the American economy. Was it successful? And how does it play out in the entire economic security. I would ask Matsubara-san for what are the cybersecurity and the cyber defense has. What is the impact on this on the industry? What are I think there are a lot of impact if there is something missing, but what is the positive effect of the cybersecurity? And I would ask Dr. Wang, was there any measures taken by Chinese government to impact on the domestic economic policy, and what are the impact of the economic security measures of China as well as the other countries on the Chinese economy? So I would ask Matthew first.
Well, thank you, and I enjoyed the comments and learned something from all the other speakers. So thank you for giving me that opportunity. And I would just say a couple things before I directly answer your question. Let me just say that I think Nishikawa-san made an important point about government and the private sector collaborating better. I think that is central, and I should have said that on all of these issues, there needs to be better government industry coordination. I think Japan is probably better at that, and China is better at that than we are in the US. We've traditionally sort of had an adversarial or at least hands-off kind of relationship in many cases between government and the private sector. And so I think that's something we have to do a lot more work on here in the US, but that's an important part of the story. I also think that Matsubara-san's right, that cybersecurity is clearly at the heart of all of this, and cybersecurity is essential to economic security. I think we can all agree on that, and it's a problem, by the way, not just for the economy and commerce and the things that economic policy people like me normally focus on, but for broader sort of social and political developments here. There's a big concern here in the U.S. about our election and whether it could be affected by cyber attacks and other things that happen in the cyber world. So I think that is an important, a critical part of this. With due respect to Henry Wang, I do think we have to be honest about, realistic about the growth of the increase in risks. There are risks that go. Climate change is definitely one of the new risks in the world, but and a very important one. But we do have, I think, a growth of risks, as the pandemic showed, in supply chains, and in frankly, in technology. It's not just about AI and getting the balance right between promoting the innovative opportunities of AI with protecting against some of the potential downside risks. But there are other technological risks in the way technology, in particularly sensitive areas, can be used in a dual-use way to support military applications. I think that is a part of this story too, and I think it's reasonable as a citizen, which is the way I usually look at these things, as just an ordinary citizen. By the way, I have a son in the U.S. Army. I have a new concern about the way technology is going to be applied on the battlefield, and I think it's a legitimate concern of government to be worried about those sorts of risks. And there are risks vis-a-vis our relationship with China, with Russia, with others. So I think this is something we do have to make part of our economic security work. But yes, we also need to have a strong foundation of economic growth and innovation to enable our economic security. And I think the Biden administration has clearly, in a way, put that issue right up front from the beginning of its time in office, to invest in infrastructure domestically, to invest in critical manufacturing areas, and to invest in clean energy solutions. And that has been, central to the Biden approach. And I think that's, in my view, in the big picture sense, that's completely appropriate. There are details that one could debate or argue with, but I think that the broad thrust of investing in domestic economies, we all need to do that. Japan needs to do it. China needs to do it. We all need to invest in our domestic economic strength and ability to innovate. So this is a major part of what we're doing here in the U.S. My only point about that is to be sure that we are aware of the cost of those interventions and ensuring that we, because there will be some cost. I mean, there's cost just in fiscal terms of the amount of money that's being spent, but any sort of intervention by government into the marketplace is going to have some kind of cost, intended and unintended. We need to, I think, shed more light on that and be aware of that. And then I think this is true of all of this work in economic security. I think of it like insurance. When you have increased risk in your own life, because I use a silly example, I've used this before, but my son got a driver's license, so the risk to my family has increased, and I understand I have to pay a higher insurance premium because of that. But if you told me my insurance premium had to double or triple, I would not let my son drive my car. I wouldn't take that risk. So I think we have to be, it's a facetious, silly example, but my point is I think about all this activity as economic security measures as, we want to basically promote, we want people to drive cars. We want my son to drive a car. That's a good thing for him, and it's a good thing for me because he can run errands and pick me up at the airport and do other good things. We want to encourage that, but we have to acknowledge there is risk associated with that, and we need to take appropriate measures to insure ourselves against those risks, and just to understand what the costs of that are, what the actuarial calculations are about potential risks, and then to align the spending and the costs that we're going to put into addressing and mitigating that risk. And I think we're not doing enough of that with some of these policies, and I think that's something that we all can shed more light on as think tanks and scholars and experts. So.
Well, thank you. I think this insurance analogy, well, despite you are using your private cases, but I think this is extremely important because it's not just about the cost. Of course, in the short term, it's a calculation of the cost and the return, but also I think in the long term, it's about the sustainability. I mean, we are facing the risks, but if we put certain cost, whether it's sustainable to the economy, whether it's sustainable fiscally, I think these are the questions needs to be asked. Yes, for the one-shot, subsidies or one-shot industrial policy, that can be possible. But was this sort of one shot of flu, does it protect everything? I mean, there's always a risks out there, and we need to continuously, keep vaccinating again and again. So, whether we can continue to do so, that's another issue needs to be discussed when we talk about the economic security and, mitigating the risks. So I would ask Matsubara-san for what are the possible contribution for the cybersecurity and for the economic growth.
So about 7-8 years ago, on Palo Alto Networks, a US-based cybersecurity company came up with a really intriguing statistics. So they actually interviewed hackers in different countries. And according to that survey, if your cyber defenses are good enough, and if you can hold off hackers to try to penetrate into your system for 48 hours, then they will give up and they will try something else. So I'm not sure that over the last 8 or 7 years, they might change their mind and try harder using AI. But it showcases how important you have at least a basic level of cyber hygiene and cyber defenses to fend off hackers. But unfortunately, every single country on this planet has a problem, or challenge, I should say. So because small and medium-sized companies, they are really important regardless of the size. And they're so crucial to our economic security and supply chain. However, they are not resourceful enough to invest in cybersecurity manpower. So, different countries, different companies have different statistics, but a lot of cyber attacks actually come from supply chain and small and medium-sized companies because they are the weakest link. Even though they are small or smaller than the major companies, they have the same intellectual property information, and they have a good technology, and some state-sponsored actors wants to pursue. So that is why the cyber security is so crucial for our economy and security. And I totally see the point made by Dr. Wang that we may sometimes overemphasize security discussions. But I think we still have to talk about security and safety. Why? Because it comes down to our people. Why we have an AI or great technologies, because we have to provide the greatest safety and security to our people. So that is why we have to make sure that even if they pursue the convenience and technologies, but we also have to support those technologies and evolutions by safety and security.
Right. Thank you, Matsubara-san. So, the Dr. Wang, how do you respond to what Matsubara-san has said about the importance of the security, but also it's not just about climate or cyber, but also it's an economic security. And also, I would ask, what are the implications for the Chinese economy, which seems to be in difficult terms? I mean, the stock price in the Shanghai is going down, and there is a lot of economic difficulties which are now facing in a sort of an unprecedented level. So how do you see this economic security and the and its contribution to the Chinese economy?
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for all those great questions. And also I appreciate the comment that our panelists made. I think, again, I would like to emphasize that we are in an unprecedented stage of the world development. Of course, in the past, I mean, the Bretton Woods system, we have many international organizations look after WTO, look after IP issues, or look after all those. But then this new digital world, this new cyber world, this new AI world, we have no global governance. We have no governance regulations, no international law and security, no major country talking to each other. That's the danger. That's really the danger. That's really the problem. So then if we don't have this kind of dialogue, global common dialogue, then we end up everybody beef up its own security apparatus and suspicions grow on each other. And then, the things are getting worse. You asked about what China is doing. Of course, you see every day, most of the time in China, we see U.S. Congress passing different laws or regulations on China, and sanction these, punishment on that, small offense, and the CHIPS Act forbidden to sell the chips to China. Then the whole world is many places just reinvent a wheel again. Many silos of innovation start. It's a huge waste to the mankind. It's a huge waste. The competitive advantages are gone. Nobody doing that. So that will lead to poor prosperity, to the deterioration of the economy. China certainly suffer from that, and then not the Western world suffer from that. Global South suffer from that. So that's not the way to go, basically. So what I propose, as I said, we have CPTPP. Why not we talk on that? We have IPAF. Let's talk about that. let's have a China, EU, or maybe UN summit on AI, on the cybersecurity, which we hear so much about. But I think, the sanctions on that, China have to keep up its own regulations, laws, and so that, again, we are suspicious on each other. And then, but then it ends up business losing that. For example, China used to buy 40% of semiconductor chips. It's much more than China's energy import. China import 70% of energy, but China's spending on the chips import is more than China's energy, petroleum import. And then now China started to do on its own now, and Huawei has developed its own chips to power his mobile phone now. And the Japanese companies, Korean company, American company losing a third of global business. It's a tremendous loss. So I think this is not the way to go. I would really think we need to have a dialogue. We need to build up the trust so that we have more government to government talk. For example, the meeting we had in San Francisco between President Xi and President Biden is a great example. We have a parade of secretaries of U.S. different departments come to China. We have a parade of ministers going to a Chinese minister going to U.S. And then we pave the way of a summit. And then we resume the defense dialogue. We resume this AI dialogue. We start to contain the fentanyl. We start to do people-to-people exchange. Same thing we should do China, Japan, China, and many other countries too. So we need to build up the trust. And then don't forget, if we are losing the economic prosperity, we will have a rise in the populism, rise in nationalism. All the government will be so, extreme, position. And then we are facing a very dangerous world. And then we will get into the war. I mean, we're already getting into the war now. So I think, this is extremely important. We need to resume the dialogue. We need to talk. We need to have all the platform inclusive, not exclusive. We should not build up this, circles against each other. For example, I think U.S. is, just to be frank, U.S. is also, I don't know, because of the Russian probably. NATO expanded, right? And then you have AUKUS, and you have a Quad, and then you have Camp David. It's all aimed at China probably. But China is doing BRI, China is doing AIB, China is joining the RCEP, China trying to join CPTPP, China wants to do economic, China, Africa, China, Latin American, China, Central Asia, whatever, China, Middle East. China is doing all those economic alliance. Where Western country friends are doing a lot of military security alliance. That's the wrong way to go, because we need to really build up economic alliance so that we have a dialogue so we can diminish the threats of security of all kinds, including the cyber and many other things. But if we don't have the trust, this kind of risk will only increase. China will beef up its laws, regulations, internal pressures. Other countries will do the same. So it's a very dangerous road that we're embarked on. And then that's why I'm saying let's have the summit, China, Japan, China, US, China, EU, and let's all talk. Let's have the UN. Let's have the WTO, CPTPP, IPAF, DPA. Let's all go back to that, discussing table, and then let's rationally solve those things, rather than we just, beef up our own all different apparatus, and then someday it will go wrong. So that's my analysis. Thank you.
Right. Well, thank you very much. It was a very, very powerful statement, and I think it has a lot of emphasis on the trust dialogue. I think Dr. Wang has mentioned about U.S.-China summit in November last year. I think I would ask Matthew to respond to the comments on Dr. Wang.
I think that the summit of the two presidents was very positive after a long period of or very limited communication at senior levels, and so that by itself was useful. And some of the specific things like fentanyl, as Henry Wang mentioned. And military to military communication, those things are very important and specific, tangible things that I think came out of that agreement. And I believe we need to continue to have those dialogues. There was a U.S. Treasury team in Beijing last week or the week before, maybe, a senior group talking to their counterparts in the People's Bank and the Finance Ministry about some of the macro and financial and other issues. And so that's good. But I do think we have to be honest about the differences. And for example, one of the things the Treasury was talking to their counterparts about was the looming problem. It's a long-term problem, but it's getting bigger, of overcapacity in China because of massive subsidization of things like electric vehicles, which is going to probably create a lot of new production. It already is. And yet domestic demand, as you said in your question, Suzuki Sensei, in China has been slowing. And so there's going to be more production than can be consumed within China, probably, for many of these products like electric vehicles. And so China is going to probably end up exporting these into other markets. And that's going to potentially cause disruption to global markets. I think that's a major concern here in the U.S. And that's an example of we can't just cooperate for cooperation's sake. We have to take on some of these difficult issues. And that's why we need to communicate, but we can't expect it to all be cooperative. We're going to have to address some very, very hard issues, including in the economic realm.
Right.
Perhaps I could just, I forgot to mention about this EV car thing and things like that. Yeah, I think that's exactly where we need to work together. I think, European automakers are in China, US automakers are in China, and of course, EV car, for example, half of Tesla's EV car was made in China, export everywhere. So it was, Elon Musk become the richest man in the world because of half of his EV car was made in China. It was all-time highs, their stocks at one time. As a matter of fact, I was at Munich. The same question was raised. We want to fight climate change. I mean, we have a target of Paris Accord. China wants to reach carbon neutral and carbon peak. So China now, the renewable energy of China is already surpassed the traditional energy sources over 50%, and China is in big way solving that. And also China, of course, developed the EV car, which is probably good for the world to fight climate change, and then. But then we found a way to work together. I mean, Germany are developing the EV car. US are developing EV car. Everybody's doing EV car. So when you talk about China export everywhere in the world, that's probably including also to Elon Musk a lot of production in Shanghai. So I would think, if we're going to fight the world of climate change, reach this below 2 degree of increase of centigrade, we need to have all the technology available. China is the leader of the renewable energy, clean energy, and clean technology. But let's work together. Let's really, benefit from that rather than view that as a threat. If we view that as a threat, we're going to really delay our process of fighting climate change. Yeah. So I think we need to work together.
Well, yes, I thank you very much for this is a wonderful, rich discussion, and I think it's wonderful to continue discussing, but I think we are approaching to the sort of 5 minutes warning. So I would ask in this last 5 minutes, I can take only perhaps one question if there's one, probably. So I would ask her to.
Thank you so much for this wonderful and enlightening discussion. My name is Akanksha Singh and I teach at Temple University here in Tokyo. So my question is related to the terminology that is being really popular in terms of in international economic order. So like earlier, there was this globalization we have seen in past 30 years, a lot of free trade. But then there's this lot of backlash for globalization, especially from the developed economies. And there's this term deglobalization. Yeah, Okay. So, and then globalization is of no good. Then there is another term like regionalization, where we can expect emergence of a lot of regional groups. Then there is another term, reglobalization. A lot of offshoring is happening of the manufacturing sector. So my question is open to all. Like, what sort of balanced approach we can expect to maintain security of all countries, like in global north and in global south? Thank you so much.
So anybody, Matthew or Dr. Wang, want to take up the question?
It's a big question. I'm not sure we can answer in 2 or 3 minutes, but I do think that, I think globalization is still a real thing and has sort of real force behind it, which is going to continue. But I do also think it's going to be a different kind of globalization with also elements of de-risking and reshoring and hedging and finding new production platforms and new trading arrangements. I think it's going to be a different kind of, or a tempered sort of globalization going forward, partly because of the risks we've been discussing here, partly because of here in the United States, the problem that there is not the same sort of consensus about the value of that globalization, because people see the benefits of globalization have not been evenly distributed, and that has created a backlash against it. So that is a reality too, and it's going to temper some of the globalization. But the force of globalization, the need for trade, the need for producing in different places and taking advantage of opportunities to procure things from different parts of the world, that's all going to, I think, on some level continue. It's not, we're not going to deglobalize completely or even move that far away from the basic fundamentals, I think. But it's and I guess I said, because you asked about the global south and the rest of the world, I do think that the new globalization must and will include more participation from parts of the world that so far have not been as involved, starting from India to other parts of the so-called global south, which are going to participate more, I think, in global supply chains, and that's on balance a good thing. It has its own risk, but it's broadly positive.
Right.
So,
well, thank you very much. Unfortunately, we are running out of time, but I think it was a very interesting discussion. And just respond to your question. I mean, globalization is not exclusive. I mean, there are different kinds of globalization, which includes the regionalization. And because of this complexity, I think we need to have more clearer understanding of what is happening. And I think this discussion helps you to find out the different positions, different definitions of the words that we use. And I think we need to be more careful about what others are thinking and how different we think about economic security. And I think that's the way to understand and promote more globalization and free trade, and finally achieving to the peaceful and the stable world in the sort of a long-standing future. So again, thank you very much for Matsubara-san, Matthew, and Dr. Wang for wonderful discussion, and thank you very much for the audience to anticipate and to come over here for being patient to join our discussion. So thank you very much, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the wonderful discussion.